Hi, and welcome to another episode of Stack and Strategy, where we talk about all things marketing and MarTech. Today with me, I have Kushlani De Silva. She is a fractional CMO and a technology marketing consultant for over 15 years experience in the marketing industry across enterprise, mid-market SaaS, and also a former marketing leader at WSO2 and at MillenniumIT ESP. Great to have you here, Kushlani.
Thank you for having me, Nikin.
So, Kushlani, as I went through your profile, I noticed that you worked in a single company for a very long time, and then you've been in the tech marketing space for over 15 years, and now you've started to move into the fractional CMO space, where you'd probably be working with a lot more startups and mid-scale companies. What would you say has taught you, whilst being in a single company for over 11 years, that would not have taught you by company hopping, for example?
I think that's a very interesting question, Nikin, and a good way to start the conversation as well. I feel when you are in a single company for a long period of time, it instills a sense of commitment and discipline, and also sort of brings you closer towards a bigger picture. Because you're there, you see the company growing, you see yourself growing with the company, you go through different transitions, whether it's within your team, within the organization, various dynamics that you ultimately get to be a part of because you are in that organization. So I feel like the sense of that bigger picture and the part that you are playing in making that bigger picture come to reality is something that you really get by staying on in a company for a long time.
So it gives you a sense of investment or personal investment into the company, right?
It does. It significantly depends on the kind of company as well, and I was fortunate to have worked for one of the best places for such a long period of time. But I think that's what it does to you, and I think it brings that sense of discipline and commitment also, which is what I felt during my stay.
And what made you move from such a role in, MarTech or marketing for technology companies, and then move on to a fractional CMO role, and what new experiences has that brought to you?
Sure. So I think my first consulting gig started during COVID, and I was fortunate at the time to work with organizations like Slascom that really exposed me to the tech startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka. And in those conversations, what I saw was that a lot of tech startups were coming up. They were thriving on the product front, but when it came to marketing, there was a little bit of a struggle in terms of, okay, how do we get to our audience? What do we need to do? What do we need to prioritize? And so on. And what I felt was that these organizations didn't have access to senior marketing support. And they didn't have access to that support in an agile and in a cost-optimized way, I would say. And the startup ecosystem in tech in Sri Lanka is thriving. There's about 35% growth year on year, I think, in comparison to the last year. So that only shows that more of these organizations will come up with that need to have someone to guide them through GTM and through marketing. So I saw that during COVID with the work that I was doing, thought that it was time for me to see how I could bring that large scale, big corporate expertise kind of scale down to suit organizations that needed it in a smaller capacity. Did that, and then just, I guess, an augmentation of that really was this fractional CMO role, which is what I've been doing for the past 2 years, a little over 2 years. And experiences-wise, I think it's been really diverse because everybody, I would say the baseline problem is still the same. It's just the scale and the magnitude and the resources that you have to overcome that problem are different, which is always interesting and exciting because it kind of forces you to think very differently from a corporate setup. So that's one of the best things I think I've learned.
So if I were to drill down on that, I think it's very clear to everyone why it's different, right? But how would you say it is different? Of course, there's the monetary factor, right? And the resources
Yes.
available to enterprises versus a startup. But beyond the pure, the resources available, the amount of funds available, what would you say are the core differences between working with or working for an enterprise versus a SME or a startup in the ecosystem?
Sure. I think one of the main things that stood out to me in working with startups and scale-ups is one, with corporates, with large corporates also it's still the same, like time is of the essence, you need to get things out fast. But what you can put in to kind of translate into what you can get out is also significantly different as well. Because in corporate setups, like when I was working, I would work in 10, 20 person teams with a great deal of specialization across skill sets. That made it, I would say, somewhat easier and also somewhat harder to get things done. But with startups and scale-ups, they have a set of problems that they want to overcome. They are very outcome-driven, I would say. That's also one of the differences that I've seen, because you have, shoestring budgets, very limited resources. So if you are investing time or money or effort into anything, it has to translate into something. So the expectations I think they also have for marketing is something that I saw differently, and sometimes even what they define as marketing. So I'm seeing an interesting trend right now, maybe I thought I'll just bring that up as well, is a little scary also, but it looks like sales is now taking over and marketing is like a byproduct of sales almost. Because I'm seeing,
especially in B2B SaaS, right?
Absolutely. I'm seeing roles advertised for head of sales and marketing, which was not the case. So I'm also seeing a different dynamic in terms of actually hiring for senior marketing resources in-house, like CMOs, heads of marketing and all of that. So I feel like the sales role is given greater prominence in startups and scale-ups, with marketing being like a supporting function there. So you're there, you're supporting sales, or if not, marketing equals lead gen.
Right.
So I would say the expectations from marketing are different. The definition of marketing is also different, and how they see that overall engine running and how they perceive the need of people doing things is also quite different.
I think the point you mentioned about a dual sales and marketing roles makes quite a lot of sense as well in two perspectives. One is that perhaps that might be happening because of the need for results, and sales can give you tangible results in a shorter term than maybe marketing might be a bit indirect, right? And also I think in a startup, when you are just getting started, the founder is pretty much running everything, right? All the roles, and when you try to make a hire, that's when the decision needs to be made on, are you hiring a salesperson, a marketing person, or the easiest thing to go for is a combination.
Yes.
And given the budgets and so on. So, Kushlani, that actually brings me to my next question from what you mentioned about the overlap between sales and marketing, and also the vagueness in defining what marketing is. GTM can mean pretty much anything from building a launch strategy or launch plan to a full-on sales strategy, like you correctly mentioned about the mix-up of sales and marketing. How do you think you could define that, define what GTM is, and what do you believe are non-negotiable components for a SaaS company to get started, and what do you think they need to have figured out before they actually spend money on scaling up?
Sure. So I think GTM, again, where sometimes confusion tends to occur, is GTM is not marketing. GTM is so much more. GTM predominantly, in my perspective, starts from product market fit, right? We have ideas every day. Like I have maybe 5 business ideas and kind of product and service ideas at any given time. But when you think of GTM seriously, it's about translating what is in your mind into something that makes sense to your potential target market. And I say target market broadly without just saying customer or consumer or user, because even buying cycles and buying decisions are now very complex. You're not just trying to convince one person, you're probably trying to convince a little committee of sorts.
That makes perfect sense, Kushlani, in terms of the overlap between sales and marketing and the vagueness of defining what marketing is. And that leads me on to my next question very well. When we talk about GTM, a GTM could mean anything from product launches to a full-on sales strategy. How would you say you define what GTM is, and what would you say are non-negotiables for any SaaS company that's looking to scale? And what do you think that they need to get right before they start spending on scaling?
Sure. So I think GTM is, again, maybe an area that probably requires clarity also, is that GTM is not just marketing. GTM goes so much beyond that. There's everything from like product market fit to channel strategy. And again, by channels, I don't mean marketing channels, just distribution channels even sometimes, right? Pricing, packaging, all of that in essence is a part of GTM. And GTM, to sum it shortly, I would say, is how do you take what's a concept or an idea in your mind, how do you tangibilize it into something that is of relevance and value to the person on the other end. It can be a person, it can be people, because buying decisions now are becoming a little bit more complex. You have everyone from operations to finance, especially in technology decisions, legal getting involved, which makes it all the more complex. So I would say GTM in essence is that big thing, and marketing is an enabler and an empowerment angle to GTM, not the ride or die of the GTM. And in terms of non-negotiables, I would say it's your why. Why are you doing this? Because now with all the information that's being thrown our way, it is very easy to get carried away with multiple product and service ideas. Like I have 5 ideas for products at any given time in my mind. So it's important to figure out the why. Why are you doing this? And who are you really doing this for? Because if you get some semblance of that before you start anything else, at least you have a direction that you want to head into. And markets now are very saturated in most cases. I mean, even if you look at like MarTech, I would say in certain instances it's supply over demand. There is n number of tools to do the same thing. So how are you going to stand out? Do you want to stand out in the first place, or do you want to solve a simple problem with a very simple value proposition? So I'd say GTM is how you take a concept and translate it into value and relevance to who's going to use it, consume it at the end of the day. And non-negotiables are your why and your who.
If we are to look at GTM from a founder's perspective, when do you believe that a founder needs to seriously think about a GTM strategy and building one? Is it pre-product, or is it when you're launching, or is it waiting for when a problem occurs?
I would definitely say it's pre-product, because when you are, anyway, the idea for a product or the conversations that come into being when you're thinking of putting a product out there, the immediate conversation around that should also be with GTM. Because if you think of GTM later down the line, once you've had all the conversations, maybe invested, if you're building something, if it's B2B SaaS, and then you've started working with the development team and building it, and then you run into issues in terms of, okay, how are we going to price this, or you're unclear about it, or you're unclear if the market that you're trying to attract would really want it, or would they want it in a different way, or are the channels that you can get the message across about your product accessible to you or not? You have to kind of have some semblance of the answers to those questions before you actually go and invest.
Because a lot of the time what happens with startup founders is that we tend to think of the product first.
Yes.
And rather than look at why, like you mentioned correctly
Exactly.
previously, right?
Yes.
We build on the idea and then build the product,
Correct.
add in features, and then
Yes.
think how can we sell it? How can we
Absolutely.
pitch this, and how can we build that strategy?
And I think also what happens is certain features or even a product idea, at that idea stage, it's very exciting. You know, you get really excited about it. You talk to a couple of people, they are equally excited about it. But sometimes it doesn't necessarily validate market need, I would say. And again, you have to put something out there to know whether it's like a chicken and egg situation, right? You got to do it to know if it's going to work or if it's not. But at the same time, how do you kind of do it in a manner where if things go wrong, you don't have to retract everything, but you find agile ways to work around it. So having that GTM mindset, even marketing and sales, right? Thinking about it from the get-go really helps you flesh out that plan later on once you've started building. Because like you very correctly said, you build a product, then you build a feature, then you ship it, and then you try to take it to market. But having that thought process from the get-go and actually getting into conversations about sales and marketing even from the start really helps kind of narrow down whether you are heading the right direction in terms of taking that product out.
Just a quick question that came to my mind. I'm not sure if you're the correct person to ask this, but since you work with a lot of startups and scale-ups, do you see this problem a lot more when it's a technical founder as opposed to a business-led founder, or is that there in both situations?
That's a valid point. I see it with certain technical founders also, because they are the kind of founders who get very excited with products, and you build something and you feel, okay, this is really cool, this has a this is definitely going to sell. So this is again another kind of potential issue I see, is that you have massive aspirations. You look at all of the big players out there, which is great, absolutely. You have this really, well thought out big picture, and you want to go head on with the big players, and you have all of those aspirations. But then once you've started building, you're like, reality hits. Are they really going to care? We are trying to compete with brands who have massive equity. I don't have that at the moment. I want to get to that. I want to invest, but at the same time, I have to make money as well. So you come back, to that cycle. So that's why that why really matters right from the get-go. And back to your point, is I think technical, but one of the good things I see even with technical founders now is that they realize that being technically competent alone is not going to help get your product to, not just to the finish line, even into the race, even to compete. So they do talk to people who have more business exposure, I would say. But yeah, still, I think I'd love to see some numbers. I think that's another thing that's lacking in Sri Lanka, is we don't really track, how many startups come up, who takes products to market, how many.
I do believe there's some projects going on on that.
Okay.
But that would be, the extent to which might be a bit lacking.
Yes, because there's a lot of startups that come up. I know that that's still a very viable market as well, and I think in terms of startups, where I think in the top 3 in South Asia, if I'm not mistaken. So there's definitely a lot of work happening, which means people believe in it, people are confident and motivated, which is great. But yeah, I think technical founders are a little bit more cautious now, and would probably. So the good thing is the co-founder would probably be someone who's more from a business background. So that combination, I would say, is ideal.
All right. So back from the tangent.
Yes.
So one thing you mentioned about GTM is that it's not just marketing. It's about finding the ICP. It's finding the why. It's the position, the pricing, and so on. What do you think is the first thing that we should nail? Is it the ICP? Is it the why, like you mentioned, or is it looking at pricing, positioning, and the channel?
I would say it is a hybrid of the Y and the ICP because those two kind of come closely together. And then once you figure that out, you know which channels you need to invest in, what the positioning needs to be like, and so on. And again, this is also something that I see with certain founders is, so when you think ICP, you think of all of these, like, all of these variables and fixed factors and all of that, and it sounds, and there are enough and more templates that will tell you what needs to go into an ICP, but it doesn't have to be so complicated, I would say, and these are some things I think that even delay GTM sometimes, because you get carried away with certain, with formalities and theoretical aspects of it. But if you can just simplify your ICP to say, okay, who's going to get motivated by this, and who's going to get motivated enough to use my product, and what is the outcome I can deliver, how can I make their life better, whether it's a vibe coding tool, or whether it's a productivity tool, or whether it's a social listening tool, anything of that sort. Like, how is their day going to be better as a result of paying $50 a month for my product? It's as simple as that, I would say. So yeah.
So now that we've talked about the good side, or what we should do. Let's talk about what we shouldn't do, or what mistakes you've seen founders or SaaS products make that cost money, cost time, and eventually end up maybe, having a huge impact on the product, a negative impact on the product. What would you say are some examples of what people do wrong?
Sure, I think there's two things I see. One is, again, going back to that point of those aspirational big brands where you find one little flaw, I would say, or one little gap in those big brands, and then you think, oh, if I build something to meet this, then that is an immediate product market fit. And again, that is an exciting idea, because you think, okay, there's something that even these really, billion-dollar earning organizations have not been able to cater to. So here's my niche right there. Why don't I do it? But again, maybe once you've started the development work and once you've started taking it out to market slowly, you're writing articles as a founder, you're doing videos. Yeah, it was exciting to you, but it seems like it's not that big a gap in the market. So I think, again...
Is that market research, a lack of market research?
I would say it is market research also to some extent, and maybe even validating that idea with a couple of people who you feel, would be able to give you an unbiased opinion in terms of whether this is going to really fly or not. That's one thing. And the other thing I would also say is probably getting too stuck. I think it goes back to that point of, complicated ICPs, complicated strategies, getting too stuck with strategy, because strategy is important, but strategy means nothing without execution and delivery. So if at the start as a founder you're going to get, I'm a consultant myself, I'm a sayer, I say do this, do that, right? But you need doers, you need people who can actually do it, otherwise that strategy is going to sit in a document somewhere and it's never going to see the light of day. So I feel there are instances where startup founders will get a sales strategist, they'll get a fractional CMO, they'll get a GTM specialist, a BA, all of those people, and you invest, because these are consultants, and you invest in them, and they've told you 10 different things to do. Now your budget's gone because you've spent it on all of these consultants, and now who's going to do that? Right? And you have to do something in order to know whether it works or not. So I feel like startup founders, because they want, and those opinions and those that input is important, but you have to also, I think when it comes to budgeting especially, you have to also be able to set your budgets for execution capabilities as well. Otherwise you're going to burn out all your budgets because you've got 5 consultants, on retainer, and they've told you wonderful, very legit, valid sounding things, but then, you don't have a way to take it out there.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So coming to the point of strategizing and executing as well, a lot of there are a lot of changes happening into the marketing space, but also the GTM space as well. What would you say are things that are trends that are occurring right now in the GTM space, and what's working and what's not working at the moment?
Sure.
Both in terms of the execution,
Right,
both in terms of the execution and the strategy.
So let's talk AI for a second, because that's what everyone is after. I love all the memes about AI. I think one of the trends that I'm a little cautious about right now is that a lot of founders tend to think AI equals accelerated GTM, which I agree with, but which I also disagree with to a sense, because GTM is, as much as I kind of advocate for execution being critical, it is, but things like GTM still also require some critical thinking, some analysis, and various things, right? So if you go on the basis or the trend that, okay, AI means getting things out to market faster, that is a little bit of a that is a little dangerous also, because then you might tend to rush into something without really taking the time to understand what it is. So that is a trend that's a little concerning, but at the same time AI has brought acceleration and it has brought speed, because it helps you significantly with your research. It helps you, automate so many mundane tasks that otherwise someone would be sitting and doing, and then you need more headcount for. It has given you access to so many different tools, so much so that even if you have two people who are running your GTM, those two people combined with a good set of tools can really get the job done fast. So from a trends perspective, I think just expecting GTM to be faster because AI exists is a little concerning, but it is more to look at how you still bring in people for the creative and kind of like the, those more deep dive kind of conversations and input, and using AI to accelerate how it goes out.
All right. So AI works and this will work at the same time.
Correct, yes.
Yep. So if we look at how companies structure their GTM, when sales cycles become longer and the buyers include multiple stakeholders, how do we adjust our GTM strategy, or how should we structure our GTM strategy to handle those type of sales cycles? I think this applies a lot to B2B companies as opposed to B2C, and I think it's something that we ourselves are also looking into at the moment. What would you say that needs to be adjusted in our GTM strategy in that sort of scenario?
So I think that essentially, so longer buying cycles and bigger or more complex buying committees essentially means that the GTM will not be as straightforward as it used to be, because it's not, me speaking to you or you speaking to me. The dynamics at play are quite different. So the first thing I would say is that your GTM, a couple of things. One is, I would say your GTM should take a little bit more of a phased approach. Maybe you identify that if you have a buying committee of 4 people, let's say, which includes your CIO, your CTO, your head of operations and your CFO, then you know who plays the bigger decision in terms of actually, deciding whether or not to go with you. But the person who signs the contract and signs off on the payment is not the user, right? You have the user. So maybe it's top down, maybe it's bottom up, how the need is initiated. So then in that buying committee, they have different motivations. So if your GTM is purely focused on here's how you can, or your channels and your messages are purely focused on here's how you can reduce cost, here's how you can do this with less people, that might hit home with the CFO who's trying to reduce cost, but it might not work for the person who's actually using it, who's worried that if I bring this tool in, my job is at risk, if I were to explain it in the simplest of ways, right? So, and along with that, if the sales cycle is longer, that means your GTM doesn't stop after your first conversation or your proposal is sent or your pitch is sent. Because longer sales cycles means they go through, multiple vendor evaluations. Maybe you've sent the proposal, they've looked at it, they are okay, but somebody else has approached them in the process. So your GTM, that's why I said it's phased. You start by getting your foot in the door, making sure they know who you are and what you can offer. But you have to also have like a second and third phase of GTM, which is a little bit more intimate, I would say. That's probably when, you have an account manager or a salesperson aside, even if that deal is not closed. Now, we don't think of those things in GTM, right? GTM, you think you have your socials, you have your ad campaign, you have your email marketing, you're done. But longer sales cycles means the chances that they have of forgetting you is higher. So your GTM...
So ABM, right?
Exactly. So your GTM should not discount those factors, and then you have to make sure that you've spoken to different members of that buying committee, but are you still following up with them? So I see this, I saw this when I was at MillenniumIT as well, and that is also, interestingly, that's when the sales marketing convergence really happens, right? Marketing has done great, brought in the prospect. Now sales has to, you have to kind of push. But marketing's still going to be in the background and send those emails and show them those ads and do all of those things. So that ecosystem changes a lot in terms of GTM, because we think GTM stops once they fill out your contact us form, or once they, call you and say, we are interested, we'd like to see a demo. So the complexity of sales cycles and the diverseness of buying committees means that your GTM is a consistent thing, I would say. It doesn't stop. You have to keep doing it.
Right. So when we talk about GTM strategies, there might be a variety of ways in which we can measure how effective the strategy or our plan has been. What would you say are core metrics that we'd want to monitor? Like you mentioned, it might not be very clear and cut, and especially with longer sales cycles, it may be a bit difficult to monitor that. What would you say are core metrics to monitor, and what do you think are things that founders tend to obsess over, which might not be as important in the long run?
Sure. So I think the obsession all around is with leads. Like, why am I not getting leads? I spent $100 on this campaign. So leads, I get it. I completely get it as someone who is, also in the services business myself. I get it that leads are important. But so in terms of obsession, leads is one for sure. And I see that obsession getting even more intense, I think, as time goes and markets and businesses just become very competitive. But I think, again, this is hard to quantify, of course, but just awareness, not just blanket awareness, right? I would say, are you getting awareness from the right kinds of people, from the right industries? So it can be as simple as, so one of the things that I also do is I help founders build their brand, because I am of the belief that founder-led marketing or founder-led branding has so much more impact than it does from when your corporate brand is talking about things. So if you're a founder and if you are constantly seeing, let's say if your target market is the C-suite, if you're seeing CIOs looking at your profile or CIOs engaging with your content, that's legitimate visibility, right? So you're not just saying visibility, saying, my content hit this many impressions, or my website is, getting hundreds of thousands of traffic. It's about, are the right people seeing your content? Are they engaging with you? Are you getting traction from the right industries? And simply Google Analytics should be able to, kind of tell you that. Are you getting interest from the right regions? Are they spending enough time on your content? Are they Are they looking at the anchors of your website that you want them to be looking at? So there's different ways that you can measure, and I think the easiest thing is you can figure out if you're getting noticed. It's as simple as that, right? Like I said, like profile views, like your website traffic.
It might not be just one metric, right? It's
exactly.
a basket of...
A combination of things. Yeah. So look at your website, look at your socials, look at, see if, people are just, sometimes, when you're getting, a good way to know when you're getting noticed, especially on LinkedIn, is when other vendors try to sell you something, right? So, but still, okay, I'm getting noticed, I'm getting noticed as someone who is running this organization, and, which means that I am even attracting, people who are trying to sell things, which still means that you're getting noticed, which is still a positive thing. And then, but all of those get discounted and kind of chopped out if you're not getting leads. But I think just looking at how, if the right set of eyes are, if you are kind of being seen by the right set of eyes, is really a good way to kind of go about it. And also just even other, maybe they're not sales inquiries, but maybe you're getting partnership inquiries, or maybe there are people who are, they're still trying to sell you something, but they are creating products who they feel would be a good fit for the service that you do. That's still something, right? But and those are, I think, some early metrics that you should look at. If you get leads, great, but if you find that you're being noticed and you're being seen by the right kinds of people, I think that's still a good way to go about it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand is that as we increase the number of channels and we diversify in the way that we GTM, as the amount of metrics also get diluted and diversified as well. So that's probably why people tend to gravitate towards leads as a core unifying metric, which can be quite easily seen, right? And perhaps that might, like you mentioned earlier as well, with regards to the need for results from SaaS startups, leads is a very good or fast metric to view. But as you mentioned, I think looking at the overall big picture tends to give you a lot more clarity.
And again, even with cross channels, I think any channel, whether it's your socials or whether it's your GA data or or your branded search, reach and engagement are still fairly easy to track. They will be different and kind of as a standalone metric, they'll differ across the platforms, but you can still add some gravity to it to say, okay, compared to the last 3 months, our engagement is now better. You'll be able to say that through your GA data plus through your social data as well. So and I think this single source of truth in terms of data is where a lot of marketers and I think even a lot of founders struggle with. But if you kind of figure out, not in the typical funnel sense that we looked at like several years ago, but if you still build that. So if you still build a funnel that kind of makes sense to you, and then look at the standalone data in a way that is relevant to that funnel that you built that makes sense to your brand, then that's still a good way of measuring what you're doing.
Yeah. So moving on from leads, right? Let's assume that a SaaS company is able to generate leads, but then converting them through the pipeline sort of becomes the next hurdle that they need to overcome. What sort of MarTech tools or MarTech products do you think can genuinely improve that conversion versus just improving visibility? And do you think MarTech in general can support that conversion side of things as opposed to just visibility?
Absolutely. So one of the first questions I ask founders, even during like the first conversation that they have, is I ask them, do you have a CRM? Because you might not see the importance for it, but it is important. Because otherwise, okay, you're running campaigns, if you're lucky, you're getting leads, where the leads, they're in a spreadsheet somewhere, nobody's followed up You don't have any context as to where the lead came from, nothing of that sort, right? So at a basic level, why I ask if you have a CRM is at least you have a way of collecting them. And this is also, again, like from the work that I've done, I've noticed that there is pressure on marketing to bring leads, but then if sales is going to take 48 hours to reach out to that lead, that's gone, right? So that's why, tools like even the simplest of CRM, something like HubSpot, will help you, will, generate an alert if a lead is not contacted, various things like that. That just helps support the part that happens after the lead comes in, because lead coming in is 20% of the battle won. There's so much more to go. So I think having a simple CRM will really help in terms of making sure that those leads are followed through it. Secondly, you get tools like Apollo, which really help you become more intelligent and intuitive in terms of how you want to reach out to a lead. So as an example, if you're, let's say, so I work with a client who's in SAP consulting. So if you're in SAP consulting and then you ran a campaign and you got all of these leads, then you want to know more about, okay, are they hiring for SAP? What are the potential departments in the organization that might be using SAP? Who should the lead came from, it was the head of group IT who filled out the form, but maybe I should, drop a mail to the COO as well. Let me go on Apollo and check out who the COO is. Have these people had open roles, open vacancies for consultants in the past 3 months? So the chances of your email being answered after you got a lead is improved by using tools like Apollo, just to be a little bit more intelligent and intuitive in how you reach out to them.
I think what you mentioned about making a decision to purchase these or like on board with these CRMs or Apollo or whatever the tools are, ultimately come down to price as well to a certain extent. So founders tend to make a decision: is it worth investing this, or is it simply easier to use the free Excel, right? But ultimately, what I've seen probably the hard way as well, like you mentioned, is you tend to lose leads purely because you've forgotten about something.
Exactly.
And you might have lost track of what has happened with the lead, and that tends to cost you a lot more down the line. And perhaps a bit about the point we brought about AI as well. How do you see this impacting the way that MarTech products for SaaS works? Primarily because now, if you want a CRM, you can build one as well. And if you have a bit of a technical background, it's not that difficult of a task to do. How do you see that disrupting the MarTech space for smaller companies? Of course, the large enterprises probably would go with the tried and true products, but for startups and scale-ups, how do you think this would impact them?
That's a very interesting question, and like you said, I think again, when you're a startup, when you're in that, let me build this kind of mentality, you want to build, whenever even a tool like you said, like a CRM or something like that comes up, you want to build that also. But again, I would say take that example from the big corporates and use tried and tested tools, because the tried and tested tools have the workflows, they have the inbuilt AI engines and everything already in place, which means again it's another like small scenario of GTM, right? If you're going to build the CRM and then your developer who's also working on X feature of the product is going to build that CRM, again you're taking a couple of cents back. So, pay the $50, get HubSpot, pay the other $50, get Apollo. It's okay, try it for a month, and luckily every tool comes now with a decent free trial that actually gives you access to some of the main features. So you get to play around with the free trial, figure out, do I need this, do I not? Apollo is one of those good examples with the free trial. You can actually do a lot of things with it. It's just that if you need to go into filtration like buyer intent, or if you need to have the LinkedIn component integrated, you have to pay for it. But free trials generally give you access to maybe like the a little bit more
Majority
than
of
the,
yeah.
basic level of things that you need. So but I think again in that point and on the point of MarTech as well, you can, while you are using tools like HubSpot and Apollo and you're paying for those to get certain tasks done, you can still invest in like other tools, like I don't know whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, to help your potentially overworked one person marketing team to get more repetitive things out of the way, right? That can be anything from, okay, how do I repurpose content from one channel into another? How do I look at creating a social calendar, not just taking a dump of what they give, but with the right prompts and with the right input, things like that, you can still encourage people to use AI for, and I think that is the benefit of AI, because it has been a huge help for those overworked marketing teams, which is, I would say, 80% the case in all tech companies. You have one, if you're lucky you have two. Now I feel like it'll come back to one again, because you can generate everything from images to carousels to PDFs to videos, all using AI. So you're not probably going to hire a designer as well. But I would say use AI for the relatively monotonous kind of repetitive things. But invest in those tried and tested tools. It is a worthwhile investment than going, if you can build it, great, but chances are it's not going to be a person who's solely building that. They're doing something else also. So let them build on the product. There are tools to help you do things. Just make the investment and get that.
Yeah, because that's something that I've seen a lot of tech startups tend to do, is then build a mindset.
Exactly.
So you tend to build your way through things.
Yeah.
So I think you answered the next question I was going to ask you as well, is in terms of what AI can automate and what AI can replace. So like you mentioned, I agree with you. It's all about the repetitive monotonous tasks and keeping the creativity and the strategic thinking for the humans, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we had an interesting conversation about GTM. Anything that you'd like to add in at the end towards any startup founders and scale-ups out there about their GTM strategy, and what you see in the future, and how you think that the current climate might change as we go into 27 and 30s?
Yeah, I think there is potentially a lot of change to expect. I think everything from people dynamics to tools to the saturation of certain markets that are overserved but continue to be overserved, because like I was saying, sometimes you see a tiny little niche and you think that makes for a good kind of valid revenue generating business idea. But main thing I would say is, even with GTM, I know we spoke a lot about how you need to GTM and MarTech particularly. I know we spoke a lot about how things have to be well thought out and kind of put into place. You need people's input, but also maybe try to keep it simple also to a certain extent if you can, because if you are going to have a GTM cycle that's really long, someone else can beat you to it, right? I know we spoke a lot about how GTMs have to be well thought out. You have to speak to different people, get certain things in place before you roll it out, but at the same time, simplicity and just being faster and agile also goes a long way. So one thing I would say to founders is use your existing networks, your community, use online forums, communities, things like Reddit are so informative. I've recently really started going on Reddit and reading up on conversations. Use those to feed into the research that you're doing.
Social listening.
Exactly. There you go. Because there's a wealth of information out there that even your, high-priced retainer consultant might not be able to tell you, which is the truth, right? And you get, with SaaS, you get real customer user feedback from forums like that. And again, on the conversation of marketing and MarTech also, again, keep it simple, right? The thing is, when you use the word MarTech, you tend to think it's $100 subscription tool that I have to sign up for the next, for the next year. But it's not. Even your Google Analytics, which is free, is still a form of MarTech. Even your Meta Business Suite is still MarTech. Your LinkedIn Ad Manager is still MarTech. Those are still tools, right? But even the definition, because when you say, okay, we need MarTech, you take a step back because you think it costs you money. But there are free tools, and then the examples I mentioned also helps you get a long way. And I think the marketing team of the future is our full stack marketers, really, equipped with the right MarTech. I think that is what is going to make or break your GTM strategy, and that MarTech can be anything from AI centric tools to some of the things I mentioned. So if you nail that combination right when you're hiring, that will really support you in going a long way as well. And just remember that GTM starts the minute you have a product idea. That's what I'd like to say.
All right. Thanks, Kushlani, for all that valuable insights. Absolutely. We had a great session. I think that's all the time we have for today.
Wonderful.
But I think we went through from the start of GTM to all the way through what we see into the future. Great having you here. Thanks for joining us.
Lovely. Thank you for having me, Nikin.
Thank you then.
Thank you.